Hey everyone, welcome back. Dave in History for the Ages here. So, from leeches to barber poles, what does all this have to do with medieval medicine? This should be a fun topic. Please remember, like, share, leave comments. I'd love to know, like, what are the craziest medical stories you've heard in history? Maybe tag a friend on this. Do you think they would have survived the Middle Ages or any of this stuff, right? I always like getting feedback when you guys are watching this. Hit the notification button so you don't miss any new stuff. And so let's kind of go through what medieval medicine was like. It was pretty out there, but believe it or not, some of the things they did had some effect. So let's go through this. So first of all, it was all based on what we call a theory of humors. That basically there's these four elements: yellow bile, phlegm, black bile, and blood, and it's all about keeping balance in the body of these four things. And so that's kind of what they based a lot of what they did on. And of course, most of it was not rooted in what we would call kind of scientific methods of doing medicine. So you can imagine a lot of this stuff went south very quickly. So, one of the things I always tell my students about is this idea of actually, did they drill holes in people's head? Yes. And so one of the things that we see in the Middle Ages, and I have a whole huge playlist on the history of the Middle Ages. Actually, I have two playlists on the Middle Ages you could watch, and of course, unit studies for any of you homeschoolers who are watching this. But yeah, if you have like a spirit in your head, they would drill. If they thought you had a spirit in your head, you would drill a hole in your head. And one account I read once years ago is that they thought it would work because if you think about it, the human body is like 98.6 degrees, right? Fahrenheit. If you're out in England or in France and it's cold outside and you drill that hole, sometimes you would see like air coming out, steam or something, right? The temperature difference. And people say, look, that's the spirit living in your head. Of course, a lot of times it would kill you. Now they would actually do this for more, other reasons, right? Not just because a spirit was trapped in your head, but because, if there was swelling and bleeding, whatever, and after a brain trauma, they would also do this, and sometimes it could work. It could relieve the pressure in your head. And we do have evidence of people surviving this because you'll find like patients who survive the surgery, you find the skulls, and you see a bone healing kind of around the whole of the skull. So this is something that people actually did and sometimes even survived. But that is one definitely thing they did. Yes, they did drill holes in people's heads. Here's another fun one. So this is, I think some people already knew this, but if you don't, kind of first time. But your barber was your surgeon. And so you had, whole barber surgeons, and barbers were actually people who did more than cut hair. They did bloodletting and they pulled teeth later on. They did amputations. And when you look at, of course, at the barber pole, the colors, you could probably figure this out. The red is the blood and the white are the bandages. So this is something kind of cool we get from the Middle Ages in terms of, something that we still have today. And yes, your barber was your surgeon. Here's a fun one: leeches and frogs. Yes. And so in the first picture, I saw a leech, and one of the things they would do, if everything was out of balance and you had too much blood, they would bleed you out. Sometimes they would just use a knife, cut you open. Oftentimes they would use a leech. And this again, was it effective? Well, it could. It could relieve a bit of pressure or pain, but it wasn't exactly the best way to deal with things, right? And then, of course, they'd even try a live toad or frog to end with swelling. They believe the creature could kind of draw out a disease out of your skin. Probably didn't work too well. I'm sure the frog didn't like it too much either. But these are things they did in the Middle Ages as well. So yes, they used leeches and frogs to kind of deal with your various blood and bile that you had in your body. All right. Now, this is an interesting one. This, I think, of all the things, kind of one of the more interesting topics is that they did actually have kind of a garden pharmacy, right? And so, think about it today, right? People use all sorts of stuff: garlic, ginger, turmeric. These are all various plants. And they had other things as well: sage, rosemary, mint, all these things that people use to try that they would just grow in their gardens and use. Now, of course, the problem with all that is if you don't use the right dose of some of this stuff, it could be pretty bad. So you got like nightshade, for example. Nightshade would be used for pain relief, for sleep issues. But if you use too much, it can cause hallucinations, seizures, and even death, right? If you watch these commercials for the companies that sell pharmaceuticals, and then they very at the end they go, may cause this, and this. Well, same with this stuff back then. But it was even more dangerous. Mandrake root was another one. It was thought to help sedation and even fertility. People tried it for that. But again, if you use the wrong amount of mandrake root, you would stop breathing. So, there are several other things as well, but these are the things people did in terms of medicine in the Middle Ages. So I just want to make a short video on that. Of course, there's a lot more to it. I'm going to leave a couple links in the description if you want to kind of go a deeper dive into some of this stuff. But I hope you enjoyed that, found it interesting. Please remember, like, share, leave comments, watch many of my other videos. I have a cool playlist of a lot of short videos on all sorts of topics that you could watch. And that's about it. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Have a great day.